U.S. Senator Cory Booker on the chaos in Washington. Next on Up Close.
Just because there's an investigation or work being done at the Department of Justice doesn't excuse the Congress from doing its own work and getting to the bottom of things.
This is about the fight for the soul of our democracy. We cannot afford to lose this one.
There you see the leaders of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, Chairman Jason Chaffetz, Ranking Democrat Elijah Cummings. They both join us now this morning. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. Mr. Chairman, let me begin with you. And first of all, your reaction to the more we're learning about that extraordinary meeting between the president and the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. You have both the revelation of highly classified information and then this report in the New York Times that the president was talking about James Comey in the meeting, calling him a nut job and saying the pressure is off. Your reaction?
Well, I hope that's not true. I don't know if that was said or not said. I would think the president to kind of beat him over the head with the fact that if they did, the Russians, if they actually did interfere in any way, shape, or form, how wrong that is and how outraged America is on both sides of the aisle.
Congressman Cummings, it sounds like, if you were listening carefully to General McMaster, that the president apparently didn't even confront the Russians with their interference there. Will you all demand to see the notes of that meeting?
We've been asking for, I want every note that they have, George. There have been so many lies, so many contradictions, and I think documents will help us to ferret out exactly what's the truth and what's a lie. And so I'm hoping that the chairman will issue subpoenas so that we can get every document, because I think that's what we need.
And Mr. Chairman, you've also asked on a different matter, you've also asked the Justice Department and James Comey for any documents he has of any meetings with the president, asked him to come publicly testify next Wednesday, May 24th, given that deadline. Have you heard from James Comey? Have you heard from the Justice Department?
What I have heard is that I believe Director Comey and I are going to have a conversation on Monday, and so I have not spoken directly with him. It's important to remember, nobody's actually seen these documents. Even the reporter at the New York Times has not seen these documents. So there's been an awful lot written and said about it, but I don't even know that the Department of Justice has them. Maybe Director Comey has them. I don't know where they reside. I don't know if they are documents. But we're certainly pursuing them, and if they're there, I hope we find them and get them sooner rather than later.
And Congressman Cummings, when you look at the pattern of the president's interactions with the former FBI director, as I was asking Senator Sass earlier, the meetings in January, the meeting in February, the firing of James Comey, what we've learned about the notes of James Comey, some of your Democratic colleagues are already seeing there the beginnings of a case for impeachment. Are they right, or is that going too far?
I think that we need to gather the facts. I've been always one to be very careful with regard to the gathering of the facts and then coming to the conclusions, as opposed to having a conclusion and trying to search for the facts. I've seen that in the past so many times. I think that that'll take care of itself. But basically, George, there are three things going on here. One, we've got to figure out what this whole idea of the Russians interfering with our elections was all about. After all, 17 of our intelligence agencies said it did happen. Two, we've got to figure out whether there was collusion, and that I'm sure that'll come out. And three, we've got to figure out exactly whether there was some type of cover-up. That's how I see this. And so all along, we're going to have to look at it very carefully. But again, the Congress has its role. We have a role for an independent commission and certainly the special counsel.
One of the other things we learned, Mr. Chairman, this week is that, according to the Washington Post, there is a person of interest in the investigation who is now a senior official in the White House. Does the White House have an obligation to reveal who that individual is and wall that individual off from any sensitive information?
Well, I want to see that this person is prosecuted. I think the president makes a very good point. No matter who's in the White House, you cannot have the type of leaking of information, sources, methods, classified information. I don't care who it is, Democrat or Republican, you cannot have that happen. So not only do you need to wall them off, you probably ought to put some handcuffs on them and put them in jail.
Well, that's for people who are leaking. That's different from the person of interest in this investigation, isn't it?
Well, I don't know where this is going to go. I mean, again, we got to step back and let the investigators and the FBI and the others do their job. We are not in a position to actually dive in and go individual by individual and do these types of interviews. We got to let those professionals in the Department of Justice do that.
Congressman Cummings, how do you think the White House should deal with that person of interest in the investigation?
Well, I think that all of that's going to come out whether the White House acts or not. I think that will be left up to Mr. Mueller, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And there will be, hopefully, parallel investigations going on. Just the other day in our briefing, Mr. Rosenstein basically told us that he pretty much welcomed us pursuing our investigation with regard to looking at this broad picture of the whole idea of the Russians interfering with our elections.
On that point, can I just interrupt you for a second there, Congressman? Because
sure,
in that meeting,
sure.
is it true that Mr. Rosenstein did not tell you who told him to write that memo that was released parallel with the firing of James Comey?
No, he didn't. He did not tell us. No, he did not. But again, we've got to understand that you got to ask him. But I can tell you, George, as my impression when I walked out of the briefing was that this thing runs deep. In other words, I think that there may be quite a few people that may have some problems with the law with regard to this whole incident. But we've got to stay focused. Impeachment is one thing, but George, we got to concentrate on the fact that the Russians interfered with our elections. And I keep telling people, don't get so caught up in impeachment that you forget about that. Because I'm telling you, that's something that goes to the very heart of our democracy. And we can't have people in Russia determining who will be the president of the United States and what policies will be pursued. No, we cannot have that. And Democrats and independents, all of us, ought to be concerned about that. And that's a role that clearly the Congress has to play, and that's a role that an independent commission that Congressman Schwarwell and I have proposed would play.
Mr. Chairman,
finding the answers to those questions.
Mr. Chairman, final question. You've announced you're going to be leaving Congress on June 30th. Some of your colleagues are suggesting that you should leave now so the next chairman should get to work. What's your reaction to that?
Oh, look, I'll work with the steering committee, and we'll pass the baton. That's why I announced when I did. I gave people 6 weeks' notice. I was honest and candid about it, and I just want to simply pass the baton, and we will do so, because there's a lot of investigations going on, a lot of good work, and I want to do it in the right way.
Congressman Chaffetz, Congressman Cummings, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Roundtable's coming up with analysis of an extraordinary week, plus John Karl live in Saudi Arabia with the president.
This week with George